Now, I'm kind of enjoying the name of our next speaker because she belongs to a small but distinct club of people whose last names can be occasionally problematic given what their background is. Consider myself, Bill Humber at Seneca College. Now, if you live anywhere other than here, that doesn't mean anything to you. But in Toronto, Humber College is Seneca College's chief rival in the post-secondary community college business. So we all bear our crosses. Well, Mary Ellen Perkin, you know, it's there's your challenge with Perk.
Well, my mother wanted to name me Coffee, but she decided not.
So Mary Ellen is with Environment Canada, dealing with the perk use in dry cleaning and reporting requirements and regulations. Mary Ann, take it away. Mary Ellen, take it away, sorry.
Great, thank you. And somebody's going to pull my presentation up for me, I hope? Oh, I get to... There we go, magic. So thank you once again. I'm the manager of consumer and cleaning products at Environment and Climate Change Canada. So dry cleaning is one of my files. I've been involved in the dry cleaning file for about a decade now. So there's a lot of folks here with a lot more experience, but we've really appreciated the opportunity to come and meet with you over the last day and a half. Our opportunity in engaging with stakeholders is we learn a lot, we get a lot of feedback, it helps us better look at how our program works. And with me in the room, I have Sufi Rirash, who is the Risk Management Officer in charge of this file. So some of you may have spoken to Sufi over the years, or any of our regional regional staff across the 5 regions of Canada that handle our compliance questions. So thank you again for having us here with you. So I'm going to run through a few things. Ooh, I've lost my color. Okay. Yeah, so there is usually a nice green banner that seems to have disappeared that says Environment and Climate Change Canada. So just keep that in mind as we're going forward. Tetrachloroethylene, also affectionately known as perchloroethylene, PERC or PCE, was assessed by Environment and Health Canada in 1993. And at that point in time, there was a conclusion of a risk of toxic to the environment under the criteria defined under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. And Jean, I'm not sure if you were involved in any of these files at the time, but some of this predates our involvement, but it's been a long-standing concern with regard to the toxic conclusion. It was added to the list of toxic substances in 1999, and what that does is gives us the authority to regulate or take risk management action. Our team manages a number of different toxics, and what we do is we look at when we assess something and determine it's toxic, we look at where are the sources of exposure and release, what needs to be controlled. So from the perspective of perchloroethylene, we identified that it can damage the environment and can damage trees, and improperly disposed of it can contaminate groundwater. We looked at the time at what were the uses of perchloroethylene in the environment. And there were a number of different uses, but there were several uses that were not controlled effectively at that time. One was dry cleaning, because there were still at that time, if you think back, machines that had open venting, et cetera. We didn't have the technology that we have in place today. And we also saw a risk from solvent degreasing. So we have developed regulations in both of those areas. And we published the regulations on tetrachloroethylene, the use in dry cleaning and reporting requirements in 2003. Okay. When we develop a risk management instrument or a regulation, we set objectives. We look and say, what level do we need to get to be safe? And we set both an environmental objective and a risk management objective. Based on the results of the assessment at the time, we looked at what's the environmental objective, and we were targeted to aim the concentration of PERC in ambient air to below 0.3 micrograms per meter cubed. We also set a risk management objective. When we did the assessment, we had several thousand tons of usage of PERC in dry cleaning per year, and we said if we bring this down to 1,600, we think that should solve the risk. We're actually well below that level of usage of PERC in Canada now. Our National Air Pollutant Survey data is indicating as of 2014 we had met the 0.3 micrograms per meter cubed, but that's based on the due diligence of those of you who are working with PERC, managing it effectively, and just because we've met the levels, we need to still maintain this activity to make sure we stay in that safe zone. So our current usage our monitoring data and levels show that we are achieving the levels we were aiming for. But the reality is we did a significant compliance promotion blitz and looked at what our rates were from 2012 through 2015 and said, how are we doing on actually complying with the regs? And our compliance rates were low. It didn't mean you were all ignoring everything, but there were certain aspects of the regulations that were not being followed effectively. So we still need to keep our job going. We still need to focus, and there are still mandatory requirements that need to be met. One of the things that's come up in several of the conversations today is the discussion of health risk. If you remember, I mentioned that the assessment was done in 1993. At that point in time, there was no health risk identified. We recognize other jurisdictions may have identified health risks since then. What Canada's working on right now is we have Canada's Chemical Management Plan, and for those of you who may not be aware, Canada took a look in 2006 and did a triage of all the chemicals currently in commerce and identified a list of 4,600 we needed to take further action on and look at more closely. We're working through that pile right now. I'm hoping that when those priorities, those 4,600 that will be done by 2020 are done, we can go back and take a look and see whether or not that risk, the health risk, is a concern in Canada or not. But at this point, our management from an ecological perspective has the ability also to help safeguard any concerns that may be coming up otherwise. So the regulations themselves apply to various categories of people based on various activities. So if you're a dry cleaner using PERC, it applies to you. And how many dry cleaners do we have in the room right now? Okay. And how many of you are still using PERC? Okay, so there's still some of you. So the first part of the presentation will be for you. I know we've got some sellers of PERC to dry cleaners, but also the regulations apply to anyone who recycles PERC in Canada or who imports PERC for any use. So that there are requirements not only just for the dry cleaners, but also for the sellers, recyclers, and importers. So if you're a dry cleaner using PERC, the use of PERC as a spotting agent is prohibited. You have several things you must do in your facility. You must store PERC and PERC-containing waste in closed containers at all times, except when you need to open them up for operations or maintenance. But basically, open them up, close them back up. And this is one of the key areas that is often identified when our enforcement personnel come into the facilities that they find open containers. So this is, if you want to know what they're going to look for, this is one of the things they're going to look for. You need to have PERC-resistant drain plugs that are readily available to seal all floor drains in the event of a spill. This is another thing that our inspection personnel have come in and identified as being missing in several facilities. You also have the requirement to be equipped with secondary containment systems for your machines, and these must be PERC impermeable. They have to hold a volume equivalent to 110% of the largest tank or storage containers and cover entirely the surface underneath each dry cleaning machine. So some of these are some of the key things that we've identified as problems in our inspections, and we have a series of fact sheets that are back at the table with Sufi. If you haven't seen our fact sheets, please feel free to pick up a copy. They give you some simple instructions that you can take back, you can share with your staff, and make sure your staff are aware what needs to be done. You have certain machine equipment requirements, and I think at this point in time, when the regs first came out, we were nudging people into the newer technologies. Technology has changed a lot, but you still have requirements to use the same drums for washing, extraction, drying, and aeration. You have to have an integral refrigerated condenser for recovering the PERC vapor. You need to prevent the PERC vapor in the drum from being vented during the process. And you also need an integral PERC water separator for recovering PERC from your wastewater. And there's also a machine design rating capacity. So generally, this is information that we're seeing a fairly good coverage in this area. You also have requirements with regard to operating your facility. All your wastewater must be transported to a waste management facility no less than every 12 months. And it doesn't mean necessarily within a calendar year. It's every 12 months or more frequently, you must have all your wastewater either transported or treated in your own systems, but that system has specific requirements. If you're going to treat it in the wastewater in-house, you need to have, it needs to be treated by the machine's integral perk water separator, and as well have had treatment system that includes a second perk water separator, activated carbon filter with an alarm, and a second activated carbon filter. So there's very detailed requirements if you're going to do your treatments. So for your wastewater, either ship it out every 12 months or more frequently, or treat it on site. And you are required to report on this as well as part of your annual reporting cycle. Another aspect is that all waste residue must be transported to a waste management facility every 12 months or more frequently. And waste residue includes such things as your sludge, your lints, your used filters, etc. So you have this obligation, and you may have seen that we have just proposed a minor regulatory change, and it will be finalized shortly. You've always been required to deal with all of your wastewater and all of your waste. It didn't say all in the regulation itself, and we are adding the word all to make it clearer to everybody who's reading the regulations. Okay. There are also requirements on transfer that if you're going to transfer perk, you need to use a closed direct coupled delivery system. So these are all mandatory items for the dry cleaner. You also have to maintain books and records, and they have to be kept for 5 years. From the dry cleaner perspective, you have to keep records on purchases of perk for dry cleaning, your transportation of wastewater and residue to a waste management facility, and the treatment of the wastewater, and your records must be kept in Canada. There is an annual requirement to submit an annual report by April 30th every year for the previous calendar year, and you report to us on, and you've seen the form show up in a couple of the videos already, on quantity of perk purchased, information on your machine specifications, and information on transport of wastewater and residues. What we often notice, and Sufi asked me to put this slide in because we have the job in our organization, you submit to regional enforcement officers, those documents are scanned and sent to us, and we manually enter them in the database. So Sufi and the team that helps out in the data entry see these reports all the time, and they notice we're missing things at times. So you have some areas that I'd like you to sort of that we thought might help you out a little bit. Often is that you're missing the information on the transport of wastewater and residue. It's important to provide the date of the transport of waste, the quantity, and the type of waste transported in Part A and Step 5 of the report. Also important to provide information on the waste transport company and the waste management facility, and both of those pieces of information are generally found in your movement or documents or manifests. So you can usually find the carrier name who hauled your perk waste away, and the company that you transported to the waste management facility in those documents. So please ensure that you take a look at that when you're filling out your reports for us. So we also, as we worked on the compliance project and looked at where we had gaps within compliance, and I've mentioned some of those, we built updated the fact sheets for you, but as well we created a video, and I'm hoping if our technology works that will play for us. Oh. It looks like the MP4, oh, the MP4 didn't click. There it goes.
If you work in the dry cleaning trade, you are part of an important industry in Canada. Most dry cleaners use tetrachloroethylene, also known as PERK. Many work with it every day, so it makes sense to learn about PERK and its environmental and health impacts and the federal dry cleaning regulations. You also may want to check if your province or territory has regulations to protect your workers from health concerns in the use of PERK. PERK is a very effective cleaning agent. It's clear and has a mildly sweet odor, and it can be dangerous. Don't be fooled. PERK is toxic to the environment. That's why Environment Canada has regulations to control PERK. These risks, however, can be managed by following the dry cleaning regulations and these steps. When cleaning with Perk, the detergents, dirt, and lint end up as wastewater and residue, which all contain Perk. The fumes from Perk can get into the air around you, and they are not good for your health or the environment. That means you must keep wastewater and residue containing Perk in a closed container. If your machine empties wastewater through a hose into a bucket, that bucket must have a lid on it. The lid can have a hole in it for the hose to pass through. The lint, residue, sludge, and material from the still also need to be stored in a closed container. All this waste contains Perk. Be careful with machine waste and wastewater. Keep the Perk-containing wastewater and residue containers closed. Waste coming out of the dry cleaning machine contains Perk. Sometimes spills happen. Sometimes machines will leak. That's why we protect around and under the machine so no Perk leaks onto the floor. Leaks could lead to contaminated soil and water, and proper environmental cleanup can be very expensive. Place the machine, closed wastewater buckets, and closed waste residue drum, anything that contains Perk, into another container or tray. This is called secondary containment. Your containment system must be Perk impermeable, which means that it must not allow Perk to go through. Also, this protective containment tray has to be able to hold 110% of the volume of the largest container in or on it. That means that if the machine leaks, the tray would be able to hold all the liquid that was in the machine, plus a bit more. One more thing. If liquid containing Perk does spill, it is critical to plug the floor drains immediately with Perk-resistant plugs. Those floor drains empty into the city drains, and the liquid containing Perk could harm the environment and even harm the water supply. You must have enough Perk-resistant plugs for all your drains and make sure these are handy. Protect the environment and your property by placing your machine and your storage containers in secondary containment. And remember the 110% rule. Also remember to have Perk-resistant plugs for your drains close by. You can't keep wastewater or residue with Perk in it lying around. You must treat all your wastewater on site, or at least once a year, transport all your wastewater and residue to a licensed waste management facility. There are 3 key things to remember. Don't let wastewater and residue with Perk in it hang around longer than allowed by the federal dry cleaning regulations. Be sure the transport and disposal is done by licensed professionals, and keep your transfer records and receipts for 5 years. Dispose of all your wastewater and residue properly at least once a year to protect yourself and the environment. Perk is an important chemical for many in the dry cleaning business. When using Perk, you are legally responsible to prevent Perk releases. That means your business may be inspected to be sure you comply with the regulations. Not complying with the Perk regulations is an offense under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act 1999, and you can be fined up to $4 million or more. By complying with the dry cleaning regulations, you will be helping to protect your health and the environment that you share with your family. Thanks for watching.
And I'd encourage you to share that with any of your employees if that's an easier way to help education. That's available, linked to our website, and available on YouTube so you can access it a couple of different ways. So there are also requirements for sellers of Perk to dry cleaners as well, and this is something that I had some sellers give feedback yesterday. The sellers have to make sure before they sell into a facility that the machine specifications are met, the same thing that the dry cleaners must have in place. They also have to verify that that the secondary containment systems are in place and meet the requirements of the regulations, as well as that the Perk-resistant drain plugs are in place and readily accessible. And having them readily accessible is a key factor. If you have them and they're buried under a pile someplace, that's an issue. You need to make sure that they're easily accessible and where your employees know that they're available to you. So sellers may be asking you those questions to verify so that they don't have any concerns with regard to meeting their requirements under the regulation as well. The sellers also have to maintain books and records for 5 years on the sales of Perk for dry cleaning, and they must keep these records in Canada, and they submit an annual report to us as well on the quantities of virgin and recycled materials sold, and who they sell them to. So we get information, we have a bit of a way to do a material balance. The sellers tell us who they're selling to, we get the reports from the individual dry cleaners. So that helps us determine are we getting full coverage on the regulation. The same direct coupling, closed direct coupled delivery systems are required for the sellers as well. Then another aspect, and some folks hadn't been aware of this, we just got some feedback in the last year, even though the regs have been around since 2003, that there was a requirement as well for recyclers and importers. A few folks may have, were not aware that there are obligations as well for recyclers and importers of PERC for any use, not just for dry cleaning. So if you're importing PERC, and this includes a dry cleaner, if you're importing your own materials, you have requirements as a dry cleaner as well as an importer. So you need to maintain books and records on the quantities imported by usage category and the quantities recycled, and there are various usage categories outlined in the regulations and on the reporting forms, and submit a report to us on that by April 30th of every year. So that there, as I said, there's various different activities that may result with you being involved in this regulation. A question came up yesterday though, and if you don't use PERC anymore and you've gotten out of the business, once you close off your PERC year, send us that information, and you can also send us something to say, hey, we've switched out of PERC. Let us know, because then it stops us from sending you mailings in the future. So another aspect, though, is for the sellers, if you sell PERC for solvent degreasing, you may also have obligations under the solvent degreasing regulations that we manage as well. There are obligations for record keeping, again, an annual reporting cycle for solvent degreasing by January 30th. So it's possible that if you sell for both dry cleaners and solvent degreasers, you may be reporting under both regulations. Okay. Enforcement's always a good question. We have a standard policy that the department uses for enforcement, and that's the compliant enforcement policy. Enforcement is done equitably across the country. When we've done our compliance blitz in 2012, 2013, and again in 2014, 2015, we took a look and we did a random sampling, and we work equitably across the country. There are more dry cleaners in the province of Ontario, for example, than there are in some of the prairie provinces, so you may see numbers look different, but we do have a standard process for working equitably on enforcing an instrument across the country. There are a number of different enforcement actions that could be taken when an inspector comes into your facility. If they see something, they have a variety of different tools available to them, from written warnings, fines, environmental protection compliance orders, and prosecution. So it usually doesn't go to prosecution right off the bat unless there's something really, really bad. There's usually a number of steps that would happen first. But recognize that there are actions that the enforcement staff would take. And I just wanted to share with you, there is a fine scheme and if you end up in a prosecution situation, this gives you an idea of the type of fines that could be implicated. The judge would make the decision where in that scale things would fall. But there are significant potential financial implications if you don't follow the regulatory requirements. So it's really something that's important to us and important to you when you look at what the impact could be, and to ensure that we are all working together to protect the environment. So we have a number of resources that are available to you. We have a website for the regulations, and within that website, we have a checklist for dry cleaners, which is a very simple checklist, and there are copies of it at the back with Sufi that give you the really quick overview for your staff, and feel free to grab these as educational materials. Again, the fact sheets I mentioned and the video are available there. And we recognize that your industry has a variety of different language requirements, so we do have the information available online or by request in English, French, Korean, Chinese, Punjabi, and Persian. So we're quite happy to work with you. And how it works on this regulation, we provide you, as I said, the regional contacts in our regional offices are your first source of contact, but don't hesitate, and I've given you the link where to find the right contact within your region. If you can't get the answer you want from a regional staff, don't hesitate to either ask them to get in touch with us or contact us at the products division directly, and we'll be quite happy to work through any issues that you may have with regard to the regulations. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. We've got a time for a few questions. Yes.
I know I asked you this question yesterday, the difference between the 12 months or getting rid of your waste every 12 months versus a calendar year. It's every 12 months, it's not a calendar year.
Yes.
But the YouTube video just said twice that disposal of waste had to happen in every calendar year, which is not actually correct.
Okay, I'll double check on
So
that.
make
but
sure
okay,
you go
yeah.
back and look at it, because
Okay.
I know this from experience as a
Yes.
lawyer representing dry cleaners, that in one particular prosecution, it was about not having disposed every 12 months, but it was within a calendar year. So it's a nuance that maybe needs to be
Well, I think that the
clarified.
challenge is, if it's every 12 months, you have to hit that calendar year at some point. So
Yes, but you could be hitting, if it's April one year, you could be hitting November of the following, and you have disposed within each calendar year, as opposed to
Okay,
every 12
yeah,
months.
yeah,
So
and
it's
it's-
just,
okay, and it's-
but I
and the-
noticed in
okay.
the YouTube video that it actually said calendar year twice.
Okay, we'll take a look at that, but it is every 12 months.
That's it.
First of all, thank you for your explanation and talk. It was very informative. What I'd like to bring to your attention is I think that you noticed in attendance yesterday a huge crowd. Our members are very committed to doing the right thing, best practices in the dry cleaning industry. Our problem is that we cannot reach everybody to educate and inform them. I know you have privacy issues that you cannot, or you do not share where the dry cleaners are, who they are, etc., so that we could reach out to them, and we can't do it because it's too expensive and too difficult. Is there any way that either you contact through your own mailings to all dry cleaners and wet cleaners throughout the province, or throughout Canada, I should say, whether it's our association or another provincial association, to get these people to attend, to participate in association conferences and meetings, and it'll actually the result will be better dry cleaners, better environment, etc. So can you address that?
I think the challenge is, we very much appreciate the role that associations play, and we are happy to always come and speak through, at association type of meetings in order to try and get the message out, because that's usually our maximum bang for our buck as well, because you bring folks together. As Government of Canada, we have to be careful about anti-competition type of situations, so generally we don't promote any particular businesses or companies or associations. So we're quite happy to work with you. One of the things we did as part of our compliance promotion, compliance rate project, is we did reach out to all dry cleaners across the country by I think early 2014, Sufi, if I remember correctly. So we are trying to reach out. We have our materials on our websites, and we'll do our best to continue making that contact. Our role is managing the regulations for PERC. We're not getting into the dry cleaning business writ large, because what we manage is toxic substances. So we encourage you to continue to work with us on the PERC front, and we're happy to come and speak when there are opportunities like this.
Mary Ellen, one final question.
Hi, could you share to the best of your knowledge with regards to the projection of presently with the industry, with the allowance and continuance of the usage of PERC? Because as you mentioned, from based on, say, with DLI and OFA, with their participation in advocating for the dry cleaners, that our numbers have been significantly reduced, and you recognize that fact. But we hear rumors that a total ban of PERC is eventually in designs. Is there any truth to that matter, or can you share to the best of your knowledge of what you know?
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, we don't have PERC on our radar screen for reassessment at this point in time. And as I presented, what we look at is when we come up with a toxic conclusion, we look at what we need to do to manage it. PERC was determined to be something that needed to be managed through its life cycle. We've set objectives, And as long as we continue to respect those objectives, we continue to monitor, does the regulation do what we need it to do? So at this point, you know, I'm not seeing anything that would push us. I would need different science in order to move towards a ban, you know, from the perspective of the program that I work on. So.
So the question is,
Yes.
is Environment Canada satisfied where we're standing right now?
Well, that's as I presented at the beginning,
Yeah.
I think what we're seeing is that we are right on where we wanted to be on an environmental objective. We were where we wanted to be from a quantity side of things. We have compliance issues. Like our compliance rate is not fantastic. I'll tell you, it's about 63% to the regs right now. So that means, you know, a large percentage of the dry cleaners are missing some aspect of the regulations. So that's a concern. That's why we're happy to come out and speak. We want to get that compliance rate up, but based on what we're seeing with regard to risk management and environmental objectives, I'm fairly comfortable. I can't predict the future,
Yeah.
but I don't see anything in the changes right now.
Well, the other reality too is we live in a world with multiple jurisdictional levels,
Yes.
municipal, regional, territorial, provincial. So there's a whole range of potential possibilities there. Did you feel the need for a final observation, sir?
Thanks, Mary Ellen. I think maybe two questions here, but one relating to the enforcement and the issues of having a number not in compliance, or the struggle there with the participation. And I think you would agree that coming to the association meetings, you really are speaking with those who are in support and tend to be in compliance. And so we appreciate that support and the encouragement. It's how do we, as we talk about, can we help and can we assist Environment Canada improve on the 60% that aren't in compliance? Is like looking for a way that we can work more closely together. That's number one. And number two, regarding enforcement, there have been some significant fines, and recently a distributor was fined, I believe, $61,000. Are we right in assuming that the enforcement will be first by letter communication, or could it go directly to a fine? I mean, I know there were steps there, just helping us understand what the procedure would be if someone is not in compliance.
And I'm not the expert in enforcement, so I think that would be a case-by-case type of situation. I think if there was something significant enough, there's generally a process that I have seen just, from a distance, just like all of you, where there may be a process where you start out with letters, et cetera. But, if something's that significant and that severe, then, I think all the tools are available to our enforcement staff. The one thing I wanted to add, though, with regard to education, et cetera, is I think, in this seminar here has been, is part of a funding project. As there are penalties gathered, the court can assign those to the Environmental Damages Fund. And one of the focuses of the fund is to try and return those funds back into the sector where the support is needed. So the funds that have been supporting this particular project here to run this workshop came from the dry cleaning sector. So hopefully that works through, and things like the activity here helps improve the compliance. Is what I'm hoping for. Is my
Absolutely, Mary Ann. Mary Ellen, sorry, I'm going to blow that. Mary Ellen, thank you very much. And despite Mary Ellen's name, Perkin, it's not Perk Out. It's Mary Ellen Perkin. We're very much appreciative of the support, the contribution agreement that we have with Environment Canada, and I think the OFA feels the same way. So thank you.